Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well in your present circumstances. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Homemakers Radio. And I hope you get a few things done because this is what this is designed for. There's really nothing here to see, and I'll be talking. And maybe you'll have some ideas too that you could leave in the comments. If you're new here, go over to the link in which I provided on my channel and go over there to my blog where I have embedded this video, and you can leave comments there if you like, and join the rest of us in some of the discussions if you like. I don't insist on it because, ladies, it's just one more thing to do, to stop and pause and make a comment. It takes a lot of time, and so this is to help you to get through some of your day, and maybe you would like to just chuck the world and just go away into a different realm for a little while, which you can do with me, because these are just the rantings of a vital woman who's just living in an alternate world. And I would like to share with you some things about homemaking, and I'll homeschool you a little bit. I'm not insisting that you learn, but it's fun to listen at least. And I have quite a discussion today of things that you might enjoy. And the first thing we always do, I know you're bored to death with hearing this, get bathed and dressed. It's like having a fresh new canvas to paint on. It's like having a clean dish to eat off of. It's like having a fresh new day. Even if you've just started and it's late in the day, this is a good thing to do. Get yourself going. And today I'm wearing an old dress from a Laura Ashley pattern. I won't show you anything about it. Unfortunately, some of the Laura Ashley dresses, they had a kind of a gathered, puffy waistline, which I didn't think was very flattering. It isn't as slimming as the A-line dresses, and so I did not want to show you how much weight I've gained. So I'm just going to show you this part. I'll put it on the dress form and show it to you. It's from a sparkly fabric I got years ago at a fabric store, and I don't remember what the brand of. There's several really good brands of fabric that you can get. One of them is Fabric Traditions. I've forgotten what some of the others are. I'll try to include them. But let's just say something about your appearance that can motivate you, okay? And if you're young and you're at home and you haven't quite got this concept, then what I would say to you is, as parents, to do a little experiment and have a day where you walk in the room and present yourself at your worst. Your faded, worst clothes buttoned up wrong, your hair not combed, you're not bathed, and just take a picture and then go and fix yourself up and come back in, take another picture and do it side by side, and have the children look at themselves and see each other, not just themselves, but each other, and say, now what impression does that give you? Does that look good to you? And they need to have their tastes educated as to what looks good. You know, if you've ever been sick for a while and not able to really get presentable, and one day you're feeling better and you get all dressed up, one of your children will say, "Oh, you look so good." That is very telling, that even without being taught what the difference between looking good and not looking so good is, and children can tell, and it's just natural. And so, ladies, I want to encourage you to look your best and have a good appearance, but to go with it. And this is quite a challenge, okay? So this is called the prep part of Homemakers Radio. The challenge is to also have the voice and the attitude and the mood that goes with looking okay. And if you're all dressed up and you think that you're going to start your day and it's going to be perfect, and you snap at someone, or you're in a bad mood, that is not going to be profitable at all. It's like you'll see somebody really looks really nice, and the minute they open their mouth, they just kind of spoil the whole view because they're caustic or they're crude. But it's the same, you could be a nice Christian lady at home, but think that you're justified in having hasty, sharp, snappy replies that cut people down or are rude. Um, and I think also your preparation should involve a little bit of stretching exercise. Just put your arms up in the air or something, or try to touch your toes or twist. Do something. It changes your mental balance. It changes something. It gives you they call this the exercise high. After 5 minutes of some of these stretch exercises, you feel differently about your approach to your life, and maybe not so negative. And also prayer, because ask God to help you with your mood. And there's no point in teaching your children or other people about your temperament if you yourself haven't been able to control yours. And I think that it goes with, that's why I think it would have been better to leave women alone and let them take their baths, have a long time of unwinding in the bathtub like they did back in the Victorian times, before showers came along and people were rushed in and rushed out of everything, because it gave them time to think about what they were doing, what the day was going to behold for them, and to get themselves settled down in the mind. There was a time when people did not jump out of bed and start going somewhere. There was a time when people approached the day at a rational rate. And we can get back to that as homemakers. You're allowed to do that. And you can still get a lot done. You can still have a clean and tidy house if you spend a little bit of time with yourself. And so it's not just your appearance. You have to have a good appearance, but the voice and your attitude have to be good too, and have a part in it. And you're teaching by your appearance. You're teaching. Like I say, do an experiment of a way to teach a lesson to, if you're alone, teach a lesson to yourself, is to one day not prepare yourself and see how the day goes, see what your mood is, see how much you get done. Another day, do a little bit of extra preparation for yourself. Get your hair, fix your hair, whatever you do to the rest of you. Just compare. And ladies, you're sending a message without words. A lady I know that has only just started caring a little bit more about her appearance. She worked for years and years in the world and was required to wear a uniform that wasn't very pretty, and it was the usual slacks and the logo of the store she worked for and everything. So when she retired, she said, I just don't want to do that anymore. So she has started making skirts for herself and wearing a different skirt to the ladies' class every week. And we've been commenting on it. And she says, it makes me so much happier, and my life has changed so much. And I don't want anyone to question the difference between, femininity and masculinity and that sort of thing. So she's just doing that because she wants to. Nobody told her or insisted on it. But she tells me what a difference it's made in her life to wear skirts, and how she is treated a little bit differently. And so it's also a message. Even the young men are coming up to her and thanking her for looking so nice. And can you think of all the people that these merchants and people in business in town have to look at every day? I'm thinking particularly of the elderly people who may be born in the 1940s, and their mothers probably wore dresses at one time. They were in an era where women were still wearing pretty clothing. And then as life goes on, things get duller and drabber, and there's not much to look at. And so some of the elderly people are making comments when they see a woman who has taken some care with herself, and complimenting her, especially the ones that are veterans, and they lived in a different world, and it must be sad for them sometimes to see how dull everything's got. It used to be where clothing changed your mind. You could put something new on or something nice on, and it changed it seemed to change everything. And so I'd like to tell you the little poem. Goodness, I'm just now learning to split my screen and see. And there's a little poem here I want to read to you. And I've used this before. And I've told you before that your appearance is a message without words, because it expresses to others how you feel about life and what your tastes are, what you like. It tells what color you like, how cheerful you are. It does send a message of dignity or lightheartedness or even respect. And so I'd like to read this little poem to you. You are writing a gospel, a chapter each day, by deeds that you do, by words that you say. Men read what you write, whether faithless or true. Say, what is the gospel according to you? I will put that on the page with the author, and you can go over there and look at that. I'd really rather you go over to the link and listen to me there and see the rest of the post that goes with this video. So now I'm going to read another one to you by Edgar Guest. Now, I made the mistake of looking up Edgar Guest on Wikipedia, and they say all kinds of things that I object to about him. But, you know, I always remembered that scripture which says, can sweet water and bitter water run together? And he wrote these wonderful poems about the home, about family, about children, about marriage, about the house. And yet they'll say on Wikipedia he belonged to some of these secret societies and things like that. Well, I don't know. I'd have to check that out. But it's always a disappointment, isn't it? You find some writer you like or something, and then you find out that they belong to something that wasn't very wholesome at all. But you know, you can write some poems. We don't need these people. We don't need these famous authors. We can write stories. And I'll tell you more about that later. So ladies, now this is back to your appearance. I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. I'd rather one should walk with me than merely tell the way. The eye's a better pupil, more willing than the ear. Fine counsel is confusing, but examples always clear. And the best of all the preachers are the men who live their creeds, for to see good put in action is what everybody needs. Now, you remember in my previous broadcast, I read something someone had sent me about the religion of Jane Austen, and it said in there that her father had taught his family that it's better to live the example of their religion rather than go around talking about it all the time. And you can see that all through her novels, because I don't think there was ever a scripture quoted. Elizabeth Gaskell actually quoted more scripture than Jane Austen did, but her Austen's books were action novels and showed the difference, the consequences of folly and of virtue. So I'll continue this poem now. I soon can learn to do it if you'll let me see it done. I can watch your hands in action, but your tongue too fast may run. And the lecture you deliver may be very wise and true, but I'd rather get my lessons by observing what you do. For I might understand you and the high advice you give, but there's no misunderstanding how you act and how you live. When I see a deed of kindness, I am eager to be kind. When a weaker brother stumbles and a strong man stays behind, just to see if he can help him, then the wish grows strong in me to become as big and thoughtful as I know that friend to be. And all travelers can witness that the best of guides today is not the one who tells them, but the one who shows the way. One good man teaches many. Men believe what they behold. One kind deed of kindness noticed is worth 40 that are told. Who stands with men of honor learns to hold his honor dear, for right living speaks a language which to everyone is clear. Though an able speaker charms me with his eloquence, I say, I'd rather see a sermon than to hear one every day. So, ladies, this is important to me, and I'm trying to get this. And this is important to me too. That it's easy when you're homemaking and you're so busy, and then you run out of something, or you need to get something before the evening comes upon you, or the stores close, and that's on your list, and you have to go out. And it's easy just to go with what you're wearing when you were doing some grunge job, but you have to realize you might have only one chance to influence anyone, and it's a hard thing, because the clothing today. Here's a long lecture about today's clothing. I wanted to be sure to include this, and I realize I'm spending more than 15 minutes on the appearance section, but I think I have something here that you might be interested in. The clothing manufacturers and stores. Do you remember back in the day, those of you who are vital, I say vital because it's a substitute for the word elderly, and I want the young people to listen to me too. So I wanted to say that those of you that can remember, back in the 1940s and 1950s, that a merchant and a product could not be sold if it debilitated the dignity and morals and progress of society in any way. Really, I don't know if there were laws, but they were not allowed to sell merchandise in stores that contributed to the delinquency of youth, or were things that were harmful, and so people wouldn't, the business wouldn't succeed, because everybody knew that, and they would not buy the merchandise. And what we have now today are clothing manufacturers that just push out tons of stuff, and the stores go ahead and market them, and they're not all good for ladies to wear. They're not all healthful. A lot of things have petroleum products in them and chemicals. And not only that, but the design and style don't lift up the dignity of the human being. And that used to be the purpose of clothing. When you read about, if you'll go back to my original videos, I have about 6 of them in the very beginning that talked about, I'd go through the Bible and start with the first mention of clothing, and go on until the last mention of clothing, and how it was used and what it was used for. And clothing was used as a reward for someone who someone who won something, or someone who was awarded something, was given very good clothing. And it was used for so many things, and your clothing would identify what you did, whether you were a servant, or whether you were a homemaker, or whether you were and you look in the Old Testament, all the different categories of services and professions, the clothing would identify that. And but now we have a problem, is that you can't identify anybody even from a distance. And I often said in some of those early videos, if you were a detective and there was some reason that you were called to testify about something that you saw, and let's say it was on the beach and it was very foggy, and there were two people coming, and it was in the 1800s, one of the things that you would have been asked was, you saw two figures walking on the beach, were they male or female? Well, today you couldn't tell. And so that's one reason this lady that started coming to our ladies class decided that she was going to dress a little more femininely. Now, so the clothing manufacturers and stores were actually, I believe, at one time legally responsible to promote the good improvement of mankind in society and good manners. If you remember, I've read several times from one of my favorite books called Simple Social Graces / The Benevolence of Manners by Linda Lichter, who was a reporter, I believe, for I'm trying to think, it was some media newspaper, and she was asked to do some research on the Victorian era versus the era we're living in now, and show how far, we have come in things like marriage, home, education, children's toys, food, preparation of food, vacations, hobbies and crafts, and travel. And it was a book about that thick, and she covered all those things. And the Victorian era came out glowing, and the modern era was sadly lacking. But one of the things that she said in there was that the people of the era, and she got her research not just from history, but from personal letters, diaries, and other things and pictures, photographs, paintings, things that indicated more, that you could research a little bit more, and maybe stories and novels and things where there'd be hints of what was going on in that era. And she said that in several things that she read, it indicated that the Victorians knew that if you let your appearance go, it would cause manners to deteriorate, and because it would create a mood swing, a downward mood swing for not just the person who's careless in their dress, but for the person who's looking at someone like that. And I said to myself, they would have been called snobs today, because if you try to improve yourself, not just your appearance, but anything, you're called a snob. You think you're better than somebody else because you are achieving something. But she said they knew that if they allowed appearance to slide, that it would cause a debilitation of society. And we see that, don't we? So, your appearance, ladies, especially at home, you might not go anywhere. No one will see you but your family, or maybe you're living alone. But it does have an effect on your mood and on your performance in the home. And so it's a ministry without a voice, and people see it. And so let's try to move on a little bit. And you might ask the question, what happens though with it's why isn't everybody else doing it? Well, this is one thing we're learning in homemaking radio. We have got to get rid of that idea that everybody else has to do it. It has to be group approval, and society has to move along, and we'll just wait till things change. You can't do that, or your life will be wasted. So what you do is you look around and you say, oh my, things are really bad. But judge yourself only. Have high standards for yourself and live them. And that applies to your appearance. I'm getting you ready to do some homemaking, so this is really important. Judge yourself and not others, and think when you see how carelessly people dress. They don't have access to good clothing. We really don't. And if you're low income, what are your choices? But, of course, I overcame all this by sewing, and I don't have to wear the stuff they put out there at the big box stores. And so when you see how carelessly they dress, you think they don't have the knowledge. That's one thing that helps, is having some knowledge about it. And they don't have the same standards. And kids, it's hard to set a standard. And I can remember many years ago, when I first started homeschooling my kids, I knew I was going to have to change something, because I had to develop some standards so that our family would have some kind of standards. And I had all these different kinds of clothing, and my life was getting busier, and I had boys and a girl, and I knew that I had to make a distinction between what was expected of the boys and the girl as far as masculine and feminine. And I thought to myself, it's such a decision to have to make all the time. What do you wear to church? And what do I wear when I'm going to town? What do I wear at home? And I had different kinds of things in my closet, and it was getting rather confusing. And then I noticed that things were sliding as far as what you wore in public, and it never was a question in the past about, quote, what you would wear to church, because everyone dressed up. But then I noticed people were wearing their beach clothes to church and everything like that, and I had to make a decision to limit my, thank you, I had to make a decision to limit my clothing. So I had one kind for going out, and then I had, basically I kept them to dresses. Well, I sew so I can do that. And the reason that I chose dresses was because they were all one piece. I didn't have to ruffle through everything and get a matching top and a matching whatever, and so they're already matched up. So that's what I did, is I set a standard, plus a standard that I was always try to look a little bit better for the public, for church, and depending on what the activity was. But it's hard to set a standard when there's so many choices, and then you see people wearing the worst stuff, like to a wedding. I remember the shock I had one time. We were invited to a wedding, and I got my children all dressed up. I think I even made new clothes for them for this wedding. We wanted to show respect, and they had not been to a wedding before. They were quite young. So I got them all dressed up and went, and there was a family there that was a family of girls, and they came in their shorts and their cutoffs and their t-shirts and everything, and I saw later on that was the trend. That was the beginning of a trend, and but I decided to try to set some standards, and you can set some standards for yourself, and other people don't have to follow it, and you don't have to judge other people, but you just set a standard. And when someone confronts you about anything, you can say, well, that's the standard I had to set for myself, because I'm a busy woman and I don't have time to rifle through everything and get this casual thing and this whatever, and so this is how I do it, and I'm not judging anybody else, but I'm happy this way. This is what I'm comfortable in. And so remember too, they're not of the same mindset as you. They don't have the same goals. So you can't just walk up to somebody and say, couldn't you do a little bit better? Because to them, they just throw on something and not even think about whether it is appropriate or not. First, they have to get to the point where they're thinking about what is appropriate. And I never like to correct anybody, because unless I've got some kind of a little booklet with some alternate ideas and some pictures and drawings and some pattern numbers and stuff, I'm not going to do that. So I think you should always have an alternative if you're going to correct anybody. And so it's the same with your raising your children. If they have not dressed in a way that you think is really respectable, then that's when you can sit down with them and show them the difference and help them develop some standards. Okay, so let's move on to homemaking. Now, I think that the most important thing is, this is how I do it. And just remember, don't do the things that I do. Do the things that work well with your house and your family. Every house is different. Every home is different. Every family is different. And their needs are all different. But what I discovered years ago was if I could keep the wet areas sanitized and clean, and that would be anything that had water in it, anything with running water or a drain, the bathroom, the kitchen, the laundry room. If I keep those areas sanitary, then if I slid, some of the rest of the house kind of slid because of busyness or because of company or because of any event that happened, or it's just real easy to get behind. But if you can keep those wet areas clean, and then they'll encourage you. It encourages you to go back and have a look, and then the rest of the house is a little bit easier. As you will probably agree. And the other thing is the windows. If you can keep the windows clean, they keep you feeling like the house is spit spot. And but everybody has to go at their own pace and do what they feel like doing. It's kind of like if you've ever taken an art class, or you decided to sit down by yourself independently and do some artwork, you have to be inspired by it and in the mood for it. You can't just follow a list that says do this and do this and do this and do it with aplomb. And so some people are like that, you know. They have to feel that urge and creative spirit to get it all cleaned up. And in some ways, the videos you can watch on YouTube, clean with me, decorate with me, they're kind of nice. The trouble I find is I can't stop and watch them. I want to get busy, but they do. If those of you that need a little more encouragement, you might just watch some of that and see how that works for you. I do have a couple of things that I want to talk about. And I might be here quite a while, so I hope you find something to sort through, something to clean out, something that's maybe a little more tedious. I do want to show you my teacup. You know, this is one of the fun things about getting dressed up in the morning and getting ready for your day, is choosing the teacup that goes with, you know, whatever you're wearing. I've shown this to you several times before, but it seems to go with this dress. And it's by Stechkohl China, Gracie Bone China. And you can get a lot of things like this for about $6.99 at Home Goods and TJ Maxx, which is the same thing, and Ross and Marshall's. And these are reject stores. And so it's such a delight, you know. And this one just has a mood to it. For some reason, this feels like the seashore. I don't know why. I grew up the daughter of a fisherman. Professional fisherman, had his own boat, his own crab pots, his own nets, everything. And we children, this is in Alaska, and we children helped lay out the nets in the summer for the salmon, and we pick the nets later on. And we also helped him when he had a boat, and he made his own crab and shrimp pots. And so I loved getting up real morning when the tide was in, and going out with him, and so it's taken me a long time to get used to. I don't know why. I'm on farmland now, but now I'm just starting to really love it, especially since farmy stuff. I saw a sign in a store and it said farmish, when you don't actually have the actual farm, but you've got all the stuff. And they're talking about this, you know, farm decor, farm looks and things like that. So let's get started with some of the things that I want to tell you about and read to you. I mentioned cottage core. Kids, you can write your own. Learn to do one of those mini journals where they use all that fine scrap paper and all the little doodads they put in it, and put the pockets in and everything, and do your own, because you probably do stuff like this, or just anything it's just about anything that you do. And this is just divided into seasons, and just gives you something to do. And if I were to help someone, if I were to homeschool you, you were here for a day, and I would take you through some of these things. We just do them. And I think that life goes so fast, no one stops to think that they should probably do something like this because it's there, because you can. So this is called Fruit Picking in the Hedgerows. Now this is written by a lady in England. We don't use that word hedgerows here. I don't know what we use. We have the same thing, but I don't know why we don't call them the hedgerows. And we have an awful problem with blackberries here. Now, you can go to a gift shop, an Oregon gift shop, and by the way, we moved here from Texas, but you can go to an Oregon gift shop, and the blackberry jam is the most expensive in the world. But they grow wild, and they're an absolute nuisance. And if Mr. S wasn't out there cutting them back and trying to control them, they would take over the manse. They would just grow all over the roof and everything, and over the years they've gotten closer and closer to the house, and but which makes it very convenient to pick them. But they're just something else, aren't they? And so hedgerows are bursting with delicious edible treasure. Fruits such as blackberries and elderberries. Oh, elderberries. Now, I wish those would grow like a nuisance around here, the elderberries. are just asking to be picked. So grab a bag or a basket and harvest the wild hedgerows. Foraging is a great way to reconnect with nature while enjoying the last of the fine weather at the end of summer. Pick blackberries from bushes to make a fruit crumble. Pick bunches of ripe elderberries for a delicious sweet jelly. Make sure you take a guidebook or expert with you so you will know what's safe to eat, and never eat anything you're unsure of. Yes, we always had to be taught that when we were little. When we were out with our mother picking berries, she knew what was okay to eat or not. And then she has a recipe for berry jam. And so there it is. You can get yourself a little jug like that at the dollar store and just make one batch. So you don't even have to have all that equipment. You don't have to have a can or nothing. And so she tells you how to do that. So the next time I'm back here, I'll show you how to make homemade shampoo bars. But you know, a lot of things, you could write your own thing here. And if you did one of those little mini cardboard journals, your generations to come would love to have them. That's how Linda Lichter wrote her book. She went through their scrapbooks, she went through their letters, and you could make one of those journals and there'd be pockets in there for letters, different things like that. And so where do I start now with all the things I have to read to you and tell you about? I think I'm going to read to you about Jane Austen's politics, because that's another thing, that apparently, and this is from a magazine in the UK called Prospect, and it's similar to her religion. She held it in the background and lived it rather than talked about it. Very little reference to it, but this is an interesting article. It said, Jane Austen held her views on the politics of her time exceptionally close. That's like when they say you hold your cards close to you, it just means you keep your thoughts captive. In her novels, government stays politely in the background. Oh, wouldn't that be nice if politics and the media just stayed politely in the background and people didn't have it on their mind all the time? Now when I grew up, it was rare to get a newspaper. They passed them around. You didn't ever subscribe. You got the one the neighbor had from the day before or something. You got the secondhand ones. And but now it's like every 5 minutes you see some kind of update and someone's always upset. As a matter of fact, in our ladies' Bible class, I've said to them, if it's something you heard from the media, let's not discuss it. It's already being discussed worldwide. Let's just stick with our Bible reading and discuss that, because that's not discussed enough. But invariably, someone, it electrifies them and it upsets them. So that's why I say, come away with me for just a little while and let's ignore them. And I think that Jane Austen ignored them too. Now, I used the Jane Austen novels in homeschooling because at the time there was no curriculum available, and I just needed some reading material that was decent enough, for my children, and you couldn't do better at the time. So in her novels, government stays politely in the background. I think I like that as a saying. I'll put that in one of my journals, my mini journals. Government stays politely in the background. It neither over-regulates nor ensures the well-being of its citizens. Well, that's good too. See, too many people think that the government is their father in heaven and it's going to ensure their well-being. But we don't need to be looking at them. They're our servant. It provides income via interest on securities, delivers the mail, and employs handsome and charming naval and militia officers. Yeah, that's what it should do. Yet she develops a rich and sophisticated theory of moral character development, virtue ethics, that earns her a position amongst the most astute moral philosophers. I'm sorry about the traffic. We're still in harvest here. The really great big clunkers going. You move to the country for peace and quiet, forget it. There's either a braying donkey on one side of you and a big old truck of corn on the other side, and then tractors over here and something else over here. She develops a rich and sophisticated theory of moral character development, virtue ethics. That, remember I talked to you about that verse in 2 Peter chapter 1 that talked about add to your faith virtue. And virtue means the practice of goodness and strength, moral strength. It's natural to wonder how Austen's keen moral vision would perceive the politics, laws, and distributive justices of her day. Scholars investigate the few fleeting political references in her novels and letters over and over, like sleuths rehashing the insufficient clues of an unsolved historical murder. Taken together, they have suggested an impressive array of Austen's political views. She's stalwart, upholding the party line of her day. She's a prudish reactionary. She's subtly subversive. It's interesting, then, to reflect on the fact that I'll just skip over some things. That her ethics do not fit neatly with anyone's party ideology. May's ambition for the... Let's see, wait a minute. Where are we here? Austen's novels seem to provide a haven for this romanticized nationalist nostalgia. Foreigners do not enter her mostly polite, well-to-do communities. Some of the men have traveled across faraway seas to unfamiliar lands, but the reader never accompanies them on those trips. We meet them after they have come back and resettled into English country life. You remember Persuasion. When Captain Wentworth came back, we don't know anything about his life overseas. We just listen to what he says at the dinner party in her novels, and you'll find out why here. It says, plausibility was one of her major aesthetic goals. She did not want to yank her readers suddenly out of the story with an inaccuracy, so she shied away from depicting anything over which she did not feel mastery. She advised her niece, who was writing a novel, "We think you had better not leave England. Let the Portmans go to Ireland, but as you know nothing of the manners there, you had better not go with them. You will be in danger of giving false representations. Stick to Bath and the Foresters, and there you will be quite at home." Now this is interesting because if you've ever tried to write a story for a child, you have to be careful where you take them if you don't know anything about it, or any kind of a novel or story. And I admire this, that she didn't attempt to actually write about somebody that was having a holiday somewhere where she had never been. That's why it's so easy to write about your own life and your own childhood. You've been there, and you can write something about it, and probably some very good things. So, Sense and Sensibility is not always perfectly in tune with today's politics. So she talks about Sense and Sensibility here on how it left the women without an inheritance, and that apparently was very political. So, this gives you a little bit of a brief summary of her views of politics. So I want to now read something from the Jane Austen Diet book. I know I've read probably some of this several times over, but it never hurts to read again. And this is called "Do Not Give Way to Such Gloomy Thoughts." That's one of the quotes by, I'm trying to think, was that in Pride and Prejudice, when Mrs. Bennet learns that Lydia has run away with Wickham. And she says, "Oh, there's such fluttering in my heart," and just all kinds of crazy thoughts. And he said, "Sister, do not give way to such gloomy thoughts." And our thinking is what Christ talks about all the time. He and the apostles in the New Testament, that we have a religion of the heart, and our thoughts have to be on things that are good and pure and lovely, and I will read to you more about that later. And why that is so important is that God knows how the mind is connected to your life, to the body. It's the guide, and if you give way to gloomy thoughts, you can get sick. So, rather than taking the normal Regency stance, viewing stress as an innocent indulgent of the upper classes, letting Mary Ann enjoy her sensibility and peace, or allowing Mrs. Bennet her nervous tantrum, Jane makes it repeatedly clear that stress is not to be trifled with. It's no random pattern that stress sickens, weakens, and incapacitates more bodies in her novels than anything else. Jane took stress seriously. If you doubt it, try getting chronically stressed out in Austen world. She'll usually threaten you with death for doing so. Mary Ann is the classic example. After being dumped by Willoughby, she stews for weeks in silent agony, till her heart was so heavy that no further sadness could be gained, and this nourishment of grief was every day applied. That's a quote. Later, the severity and danger of her deadly illness is directly attributed to her many weeks of previous emotional stress, which Mary Ann's disappointment had brought on. Then again, she's just one of the many stress-induced sufferers. Take Jane Fairfax and Emma, for example. Anxiety-ridden throughout most of her novel, the stress of constantly hiding her engagement to Frank Churchill soon manifests in severe headaches and nervous fever. Her health seemed for the moment completely deranged. Elsewhere in the novel, Mrs. Churchill, Frank's aunt, is one of those remarkably rare characters to actually die in the course of an Austen novel. What kills her off? Stress. Her nerves were under continued irritation and suffering. Mrs. Bennet gets a sort of deathbed warning, too, being constantly in the fidgets, suffering from chronic fears that her husband will die, leaving her homeless. Oh, goodness, isn't that like the story of everybody? Will probably have the reverse effect in the end. As the far calmer Mr. Bennet Riley portends, my dear, do not give way to such gloomy thoughts. Let us flatter ourselves that I may be the survivor. Many people still regard stress with Regency laxness, viewing it as an inevitable and normal part of life. But since the 1950s, science has been playing catch-up with Jane, gradually defining the seriousness of stress in the most identical ways. I just wanted to give you that. I have been on my Regency walk with a delightful young lady who lives next door to me, and we walked down the farmer's field, down the road, and then in the middle of his field he has another road, so he lets us walk down there too. I could walk around the manse, on the property around the manse, but it isn't an even floor. It isn't an even ground, and it's kind of fun to get out into the fields. I'm in the midst of trees. And so I want to tell you about this. I was talking to you about Jane Austen's politics and the character that went with them. And I have about 3 or maybe 4 verses that I sometimes bring along with me in this class, because there are many more, but you could make a college semester out of this one. And this is from 2 Peter chapter 1. Make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. Now, there's more to this. If you want to finish reading the whole paragraph, that's fine, but I'm going to stop right there. But I have spent 3 different ladies' classes on this with 3 different aspects of it. And at first I called it an equation, and I said you have to add this in the order that it came. You know, you and I, we can have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we can add them and get the answer, get the equation. But we could mix them all up and add them again. You can't do that with this equation. It says, add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge. And you cannot just start out with knowledge. Knowledge is attractive, you know. That's what all the education system is about, is knowledge. You have to have faith first, and then virtue, which is the practice of goodness or moral strength. And then the knowledge. So add to your faith virtue, and your virtue knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and then add godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. Well, let me just now portray it as a recipe instead of an addition, although it says add. But you know, you get a recipe and it will say add the liquids a little at a time, then add this, and then add that. So let's treat it like a recipe. And I have the recent Tea Time magazine. You know, I really recommend you subscribe, because if you go to the store to buy it, it's $10. But if you subscribe, it's $5 an issue, because you divide the number of issues you get a year into the sum that you're going to pay, and it's actually cheaper to subscribe. But what I like about it is it's never a discouraging word. And I know a lot of really young teenage girls that love this magazine, and they'll keep it. It's part of their cookbook collection. It's not something you would throw away. You just keep it. So I'm going to read you a recipe and give you an example of why you have to add to your faith virtue. You have to have faith first, then virtue, and then knowledge, and then self-control. Because with knowledge, you have to have some self-control with it. It's knowledge puffs up. You can easily get excited about your religion, or about your home, or your homeschooling, or about your sewing, or about the way you dress. You can get excited about that. I have a lot of knowledge about it, but not learn discernment about how to use it and when to talk about it. And that's why I say it's the best non-verbal sermon you'll ever have, is when you dress up. So I'm going to read this recipe. I'll show you the picture of it. Now, when I was, it looks like granola with cream and fruit. It's a tea time, autumn tea time, probably because of the color. But when I was really, really young, and my mother had a lot of children, and when she was having one of her children, one of her babies, I was home, and my father wanted me to fix something, and I kind of knew, you know, the recipe in the book, in the cookbook, but I was not taught yet how to do it. So I just, you know, dumped everything in a pan and tried to mix it up, and it didn't work. And that's the same thing with this add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge, and to your knowledge self-control. You can't just, you know, stick it all in your personality and stir it up and have it work. Everything has to be done by stages, and then you add, after you've got one thing learned, then you add something else to it. And you can't just stick it in a bowl and stir it all up, because some of it will just not blend, you know, and it just won't work. So I'll read you this, and then maybe you'll get my point. And these are called spiced apple parfaits. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but if I tell you to buy the magazine, maybe it won't be so bad. Cinnamon and apple pie spice. Here's the thing. It's got a list of ingredients. I'll read you the ingredients, and then I'll tell you. 2 cups of 1/4 inch diced Gala apple, approximately 1½ apples. 1/2 cup sweetener. I use date sugar. You can use what you want or nothing. 1/2 teaspoon ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon apple pie spice, 1/8 teaspoon salt, and a cup of sunflower granola. And there's a recipe for the sunflower granola over here. And 2/3 cup of yogurt. Well, here's the recipe for the granola: oats, sunflower kernels, almonds, dates, pineapple, sugar, brown sugar, maple syrup, salt, and apple pie spice. Okay, you can take all those ingredients and ignore the instructions and dump them all in a bowl and mix them up, but it won't work because these have to be done in layers. You see, first you put the fruit in, then you put the yogurt in, and then you put the granola in. You can't just read a recipe, dump it all in a bowl, and mix it up. And it's the same with 2 Peter chapter 1, where it says, add to your faith virtue. You've got to have faith first, then virtue, then knowledge, then self-control, then brotherly love. It all lead to the same thing. It'll all lead to the same thing, but it has to be done in that order. And that's the way a cookbook is, because it'll say, add this, add that. You read the instructions underneath the little list here, and you see that word add many times, and it has to be at a certain point. It says, in a bowl, stir together apples, add the sugar, cinnamon, apple pie spice, and salt. Transfer the mixture to a baking pan. Bake until apples are tender, approximately 12 minutes. Now, if you didn't read that, you might throw all that in the oven and wonder how come it turned out so bad, but apparently there's only one part of it that you'll bake. And then it says, in individual glasses or dishes, layer the cooled apples, the yogurt, and the granola, and serve immediately. You have to read the instructions, and things have to go in, and you have to add them at certain times. And so that's my next take on that lesson about adding. You can't just read a recipe and throw everything in and expect it to turn out, because some things have to gel a little bit. So now, when I told you that you could all write a book, well, I was with my descendants the other day, and one of the little ones, he says he is 4 and 10 twelfths. He's learned, how many months it takes. And so he says he's 4 and 10 twelfths. And I can't just say you're 4, I have to say 10 twelfths. But he wanted me to write a book to him on how not to have a miserable life. And I said, well, I don't know what that would be, but you could help me. Just tell me what the chapters will be. So he chose the chapters. So I wrote that he had asked me to write a book for him about how not to have a miserable life. So chapter 1 was, he said, I can pick flowers. I said, so I wrote chapter 1, pick flowers, give them to someone else, put them in a jar or a bowl, and draw a picture of the flowers and color them, or just set them somewhere to admire. If every boy will like flowers, he will not be able to live a miserable life. So I said, what else? And what do you like to do? And he said, I like to play in my little swimming pool. So I said, play in chapter 2, play in a swimming pool, or take a long bath. Enjoy the toys for water. Listen to the sound the water makes when you pour it. Feel how good it makes your day when you have sat in a little pool or a bath. If every boy did this, he would not have a miserable life. So he gave me the ideas, and he even phoned me one day and said, I've got one more, and I added it to it. And I was in such a hurry that I just did a messy job, so he left the book with me to write over. Chapter 3. So he was over there in a corner, and he had some cardboard and some tape. We always have lots of supplies of tape and cardboard. And do you remember back in the day when you could not get a piece of tape, Scotch tape from anybody, or sticky tape from anybody, because it was just so dear that they wouldn't dream of letting a kid have a whole carton of it, but we do that. I prefer the tape over the glue. And so he cut a shield and a sword out of this thick cardboard, and wanted me to get a picture of him with the shield and the sword. He posed really nice with it. It was like Goliath or something. So I said, chapter 3, make things out of cardboard. You will need cardboard, scissors, pins, and tape. You can make toys, shields, games, and robots. If a boy will entertain himself by making things with cardboard, he will not live a miserable life. Chapter 4. He likes to have a cup of tea, and his favorite is Bengal spice, or it's a cinnamon flavored non-alcoholic, non-caffeine tea. And he likes to have, you give him the tea bag. He wants to do it himself. Put the tea bag in and out, and pick a favorite cup out of the china cabinet. I used to protect all that china, but what am I going to do with it? It's just something to pack away after I die. And so I just go ahead and let them use it, crack it if they have to, and use it. And it's like my mother used to say when I was little, if something broke, there's more where that came from. When did we quit believing that? And so they're to be used. So he just picks out what he wants. And his favorite cup is one that's very rare. It has a little deer on it in the forest, and very hard to find animal type prints on a teacup. And so have a cup of tea, chapter 4. Use a favorite cup. This is what I wrote it like. You can do this too. And I stitched it on the machine to make it easy. You can fit about 6 of these little cards, index cards in there, and it won't hurt the machine needle if you use one of the thicker needles. And just to make it easy, I just stitched it. So have a cup of tea. Use a favorite cup. Get a tea bag. Add water and anything else you like. Listen to the teacup when it clinks on the saucer. If a boy will enjoy a cup of tea, he cannot live a miserable life. Now, another thing he does is if you give him anything, or he wants something and you hand it to him, or he can't find a pencil or a pen, he'll say, thank you. And I'll think, well, that's nice. He says, thank you. But he just stands there and says, thank you, thank you. And finally I asked his mother, why does he do that? And she said, he's waiting for you to say you're welcome. He just loves to hear someone say you're well. He loves the little, remember I had a talk with you a long time ago about small talk and how important that was. And some people back in the 60s started to look down on it. Like, how are you? How's the weather where you are? Would you like a cup of tea? Some people looked down on it because it wasn't important stuff. It wasn't intellectual. But how much do we need that to warm up our minds and to get our breathing normal? And I was listening to a couple of women in the grocery store. I just kind of walked by. They didn't know I was eavesdropping, but they were talking about a place they had been and eaten something that they liked. And it wasn't particularly anything I would have liked, but I just loved to hear their expressions. And one of them said, oh, was it the place you usually go? Oh, is that over there by such and such? And I just loved the way their voices lilted, and they were so interested in that. Well, what was in it? Well, just asking her how she was. It was all very trivial, but that kind of thing, I guess, builds people up, and we need a lot more of. Listen, try to remember, you who are vital. Back in the old days, listening to the older people talk, there was no pushy agenda behind it. It was normal talk. They were just kind of catching up with one another and touching base, as they said. So chapter 5, say thank you. Someone will say you are welcome, and it makes you happy to hear it. It makes someone happy when you say thank you. If a boy will say thank you, he will not have a miserable life. Now, one of the other boys that was here wanted me to write how to have a happy life, so I started a book for him, and I'll have to call him up and get the names of his chapters on there. So he noticed that I was tuning into a little exercise class on YouTube, and I was just doing a 5-minute stand up and stretch, and he saw me doing it one day, and he said, Mima, you don't have to use YouTube anymore. He says, I'll be your exercise instructor. And he was actually pretty good, and being 4 and 10/12, or 11/12, he's in such good shape. Maybe I should take his exercise instructions. They were actually pretty good. I felt great after he'd shown me how. And so I decided to put exercise in here on chapter 6. Stretching makes you feel happy in your thinking. Invent your own stretch exercise and help others. If a boy will stretch and exercise, he will not have a miserable life. See, the name of it was How Not to Have a Miserable Life, and that was his idea. So chapter 7, So we had been on a nature walk. I had told you that about a couple weeks ago in my last video, and just picked up things and put them in a little box. And it was like shaped rocks, unusual big tree cones, leaves. There were some huge leaves out there that had changed color, and they have there's a wildflower that grows out there that they call it nature's glue, and it's got a sticky piece on it. And the boys were showing me how they get the sticky off, and they glued two leaves together and showed me how it glued these leaves together. So we picked some of that nature's glue. So and he just enjoyed that so much that the next time he came, that's what he wanted to do. And he knows that I have a list. So when he comes, he sees this list and wants to make sure that we do it all. Nature walk. Get a box or a basket or a bag or a bucket or anything and go for a walk. Pick rocks that look like something, pine cones, leaves, berries, apples. We found a whole bunch of little wild apples. Apples, sticks. If a boy will go on a nature walk, he will not have a miserable life. You know what? Maybe I should teach some adults to do this too. Okay, chapter 8. He has a Bible story book that's on his little bed, and he just loves that book. And I got it at Hobby Lobby, and it has more realistic paintings in it, pictures in it, illustrations. They're not cartoony, with the strange bug eyes and some of those. I just love some of the Bible storybooks at the dollar store, but I can't stand the cartoony look in the faces. It's kind of scary. So he just loves that Bible storybook. And so this is chapter 8. Look at a Bible storybook in bed at night. It will help you sleep. If a boy will read Bible stories at night, he will not have a miserable life. So chapter 9, I was finished, and he came running in, and he said, I have another chapter. Lay down on the grass and look at the trees blowing above you. So he and the other children had gone out and done that, and he remembered to come in and tell me. So I wrote that down. If a boy will look at the trees blowing in the breeze, he will not have a miserable life. So then he had another one, and he came in and told me about it. And this is chapter 10. Lay down on the grass and look at the stars at night. If a boy will look at the stars at night, he will not have a miserable life. And then he called me up with 2 more. And this was chapter 11. Sing. Sing about everything. Make up songs about waking up, eating, working, breathing, walking, hearing, seeing. When a boy sings about everything, he will not have a miserable life. And I had one of those children that would just start singing about something. And I'd say, what are you singing about? He'd want to be alone. But they'd sing about something they saw, a squirrel or a bird or the plants or maybe their own toys or the house or their food or anything like that. They would sing about it. And then the last chapter was chapter 12, and it was about playing with someone. And he said that made him happy, and he's not miserable if he can find someone to play with. And so he would even ask me, will you play with me? That is really neat, to have somebody ask if you'll play with them. That is just such a thrill. And so now I want to finish off, ladies, by reading some of Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. Now, we don't really need these authors. You could write stuff that you could read to your children or to other people. But I will read this. And what I like about it is, of course, the character studies that are in it. And I wanted to get to the people part, but I'm going to use Wives and Daughters as that right now. But I have a whole collection of notes on that I want to talk to you about. So I'm going to read a little bit of Wives and Daughters here. And this is when her father tells Molly that he's going to be married again, and she is so grieved. She's just cut up with grief, and she said, "This is why I was sent away, so you could quietly do this behind my back." And so if you have got, you can get that DVD set. It's worth watching. I always watch it for different reasons. My granddaughter and I watched it, and we sketched some of the clothing in it, and I had to look at all the table centerpieces, and just for relaxation. She said, "So I was sent out of the house that all this might be quietly done in my absence." Out of her bitterness of her heart she spoke, but she was roused out of her impassiveness by the effect produced. Her father stood up and quickly left the room, saying something to himself. What she could not hear, though she ran after him, followed him through dark stone passages, into the glare of the stable yard, into stables. "Oh, Papa, Papa, I'm just not myself. I don't know what to say about this hateful, detestable." He led the horse out. She did not know if he heard her word. Just as he mounted, he turned around with her with a gray, grim face. "I think it's better for both of us for me to go away now. We may say things difficult to forget. We are both much agitated. By tomorrow we shall be more composed. You will have thought it over, and seen that the principal, one great motive, I mean, was your good. You may tell Mrs. Hamley I meant to have told her myself. I will come again tomorrow. Goodbye, Molly." And this reminds me of something, and that is, he said, we shouldn't talk about it now. We'll talk about it tomorrow when we're both feeling a little bit better about it. And it's so sad in a way that many family relationships are harmed by people that insist that they can't let a matter go for now, and will push it, and when the other person is not receptive to it, and I don't quite know what to do about that, but that just was something that I noticed in there, that her father, he was probably the most character I admired the most was her father in that movie, and he just said, "I think we better." But then these people were bred differently than we were. They were given manners and instruction on all this kind of stuff, and many times the difficult time will happen where we've never seen the people before us. Our grandparents never reported anything like that and what they did, and we're at a loss sometimes and can blurt out things that make us and them sad. So this is just something to think about, that he wrote away saying, "I think it's best if we don't talk about it." So ladies, I hope you've had a wonderful time and that you got a lot done today. I do want to come more often. Please pray for me so that I can get here more often, because if I don't, I end up with, I'll show you what I end up with if I don't come. A big stack of notes that I can't decipher later on, and so I need to just kind of sit down here every time I write down one of those pages and talk to you. So you can leave a comment if you like on the blog, but you don't have to, because I know that takes time. But I just thank you so much for coming here. This is so convenient. I can remember having to pack up things and even take my children with me and go because there was a speaking thing that I had to listen to or something at church. This is just so much better, and I hope it's been pleasant for you. And so I want to remind you to keep your mind on Christ. Isn't there a scripture that says, "Have this mind in you, which was in Christ Jesus"? So keep your mind on Christ, and I will talk to you later. Bye.